It started with a sound, a low, restless murmur that rose from the crowd like the slow roll of distant thunder. Then came the first boo, sharp, cutting, a sound that pierced through the polite air of Washington's Fortune's most powerful women's summit like a needle through silk. For a moment, everything froze. Cameras hung mid-pan. Journalists blinked. The woman at the center of it all, Meghan Markle, smiled, that trademark half-smile polished by years of media training. But behind it, something flickered. Surprise? Anger? Fear? No one could tell. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. This was supposed to be her comeback, her redemption arc, the day she reclaimed the narrative and stepped out of the shadow of royal scandal into the glow of empowerment and prestige. But instead, that single, echoing chorus of disapproval became the moment her illusion cracked wide open, right there, under the blinding stage lights of Washington, D.C. How did it come to this? How did a woman once hailed as a global symbol of modern royalty, the self-made duchess, the advocate for women's voices, end up being heckled at an event meant to celebrate powerful women? Was it fatigue, hypocrisy, or something far deeper? A growing rebellion against what many now call the Meghan effect. Let's rewind. It was a cool morning in Washington, the kind where the air buzzes with ambition, and every taxi seems to carry someone important. The Marriott Marquis had been transformed into a fortress of elite networking, CEOs, senators, journalists, and world changers walking shoulder to shoulder. For years, the Fortune Summit had been the crown jewel of women's leadership conferences, a place where names like Melinda Gates, Sheryl Sandberg, and Oprah Winfrey had once stood and spoken about change. And this year, Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, actress turned activist, was billed as the closing speaker. Her PR team had worked for months to secure it. Emails, negotiations, brand pitches, everything was orchestrated to paint this as her reintroduction to the American elite. After years of bruising headlines, canceled Netflix projects, and whispers of fading relevance, Meghan was ready to stage her own renaissance. Except Washington had other plans. She arrived in a sleek black SUV convoy, cameras flashing. Her outfit, a muted beige power suit, was carefully chosen to communicate humility and control. The pearl earrings, the subtle gold cuff, the modest neckline, everything screamed professional reinvention. But beneath that polished surface, her team was nervous. Because behind closed doors, the atmosphere was tense. Several sponsors had expressed unease about her inclusion. A handful of guests had reportedly declined to attend the dinner portion once her name was confirmed. One anonymous executive allegedly told a journalist, "We're here to talk about power, not pity." Still, Meghan pressed forward. She was confident that charm could win back even the coldest audience. After all, she'd done it before. She knew how to tell a story, how to make the world lean in with her pauses and inflections. She believed the crowd would come around once they heard her speak. But what Meghan didn't realize was that the tide had already turned long before she stepped on that stage. It began with whispers. Whispers that she hadn't written her own speech. Whispers that she was being paid more than other speakers. Whispers that her team had requested an enhanced introduction with a highlight reel and carefully approved talking points for moderators. To the public, these were small things. But in the quiet corridors of Washington's elite circles, those details meant everything. They screamed ego, entitlement, disconnection, and in a city built on subtle power, that was unforgivable. Still, Meghan's handlers brushed it off. "She's polarizing." "That's good for clicks," one of them reportedly said backstage. "As long as people are talking, we're winning." But this time, the noise wasn't applause. By the time she took the stage, the energy in the room had shifted. Journalists noted the stiffness of the front row. Political figures exchanged glances. A few attendees even muttered under their breath as her name was announced. And then, as Meghan walked across the stage, chin lifted, heels echoing against the polished floor, someone from the crowd shouted something unintelligible. Then came another, and suddenly, a wave of boos swept across the hall. For a heartbeat, she froze. Her hand tightened around her cue cards. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every twitch of her face. She blinked once, twice, and then smiled again. But it was different this time. Forced, fragile. She began to speak. Her voice trembled for a moment before finding rhythm, the rhythm of practiced confidence. "It's an honor to be here," she said, "among women who inspire change." But the words hung heavy in the air. Because the room wasn't listening, not really. They had already decided. And as she continued, struggling to command the room, it became painfully clear that the applause was polite at best, obligatory at worst. The audience that had once adored her now regarded her with skepticism, perhaps even disdain. But why? Why had admiration turned to resentment? Why did a room full of successful women, women who once might have championed her, now reject her so openly? Part of the answer lies in timing. Meghan had spent years crafting a public image built on empowerment, but critics accused her of weaponizing victimhood. They said she spoke about resilience while burning bridges behind her. They remembered her royal interview where she accused the monarchy of racism, a moment that shook Britain and thrilled American media. But they also remembered the contradictions. The luxury deals, the personal brand expansion, the curated tears. And now, in Washington, a city that worships authenticity but despises self-promotion, those contradictions were impossible to ignore. Still, her team insisted this would be her rebirth. They believed the booze would fade, that the headlines could be spun. After all, scandal had never stopped her before. But something about this night was different. It wasn't just a PR mishap or a social media trend. It was symbolic. For years, Meghan had positioned herself as a voice of progress, a victim of outdated systems. But at the Fortune Summit, surrounded by women who had built empires from nothing, her narrative felt hollow. They didn't see a fighter anymore. They saw a performer. And as she spoke, that invisible wall between image and reality began to crumble. Still, the cameras rolled. The live stream continued. Millions watched online, dissecting every second. Some defended her, others delighted in her discomfort. Social media lit up with hashtags like #BootInDC, #FortuneSummit, and #Meghan speech fail. But what no one knew, not yet, was that the real drama wasn't on stage. It was happening backstage. Behind the curtain, Meghan's team was in panic mode. Phones buzzing, whispered arguments, conflicting instructions to the event staff. One aide reportedly snapped, "Cut the questions, just get her off stage." Another whispered, "She needs to finish strong, or this is going to be catastrophic." Meanwhile, Meghan kept smiling, unaware of the full storm brewing behind her. Or perhaps she knew, perhaps she felt it. The air in the room had changed. Her instincts, honed from years of acting and interviews, must have sensed the shift. But still, she pushed through. That's what Meghan does best. She pushes through. It's her greatest gift and her greatest curse. Because sometimes, pushing through means walking straight into disaster. After 20 minutes of awkward applause and half-hearted nods, she closed her speech with a line meant to inspire. "We are all stronger when we lift each other up." The audience clapped. Some stood. Most didn't. And then, as she turned to leave, someone in the crowd shouted again. This time, clearer, louder. "Practice what you preach." Gasps. Cameras clicked. Meghan paused mid-step. Her face tightened just slightly before she vanished behind the curtain. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then chatter. Nervous laughter. Whispers. The Duchess had left the building. But outside that building, in the real world of social media and 24-hour news, the story was only beginning. Because what came next would ripple far beyond Washington. It would shake her foundation, test her marriage, and ignite questions that even her most loyal supporters couldn't ignore. And it all started with that sound, that sharp, unmistakable echo of rejection, the booze that no amount of PR spin could erase. Was this the moment she realized the crown had never really left her head, only tilted, just enough to fall? That night, after the booze echoed through Washington, Meghan Markle sat in the back seat of a blacked-out SUV, staring at her reflection in the tinted glass. The city lights flickered across her face, gold, blue, red, each flash cutting through the stillness like an accusation. She didn't speak. She didn't move. The silence was thick enough to hear her breathing. Her assistant sat beside her, clutching a phone, terrified to make a sound. Because everyone in that car knew it. Something had cracked. But maybe, just maybe, she could still fix it. That's what Meghan believed. She had always believed that. Because in her world, every fall was just a setup for a grander comeback. Every humiliation, a prelude to a perfectly timed reinvention. That's what this event was supposed to be, her return to form. Her team had even used those exact words in the pitch deck sent to Fortune's event planners. America loves a redemption story, the proposal had said, and no one embodies resilience like Meghan Markle. It sounded poetic. It sounded powerful, but it wasn't real. Because the Meghan that Washington met that night wasn't the survivor of adversity or the fearless truth-teller she wanted to be. She was something else entirely, a woman desperate to be seen, yet terrified of what people saw. Let's rewind a few days before the summit. In her Montecito mansion, the atmosphere was electric. Makeup artists, stylists, and PR consultants shuffled through the glass hallways like stagehands before opening night. A whiteboard in her media room displayed one word in bold capital letters: comeback. Underneath, bullet points: empowerment, renewal, grace, control. She rehearsed her speech in front of a full-length mirror. Her voice steady, her hands deliberate. When women support women, we create ripple effects of power, she practiced. Then paused, repeated, again and again. Every syllable tuned for effect, every pause choreographed for sympathy. Harry walked by once, pausing at the doorway. You don't have to prove anything, he told her softly. But she only smiled and replied, Oh, Harry, in America, you always have to prove something. Those words lingered. Because deep down, Meghan wasn't just trying to prove herself to the audience. She was trying to prove something to herself. That she could stand on her own. That she didn't need a crown to command attention. That the Duchess title wasn't the reason people listened. It was the woman behind it. But Washington isn't Hollywood. In Hollywood, charisma can rewrite failure. In Washington, failure gets remembered. And while Meghan believed she was walking into admiration, the whispers told another story. Sponsors had quietly expressed reservations. Is she really the right fit for the tone this year? One email read. The public's grown tired of her drama. Another response was blunter. She'll bring views, but not credibility. Her team ignored those warnings. They thought controversy equaled relevance. They forgot that in Washington, power doesn't shout. It whispers. The morning of the summit, Meghan's stylist laid out 3 wardrobe options: soft white, innocence; crimson, confidence; and beige, neutrality. She chose beige, the safe middle. Understated elegance, she called it. We want the focus on my message, not my outfit. But no matter how carefully she chose her words, her clothes, her tone, her reputation arrived in the room before she did. And reputations in Washington are hard to shake. As her car approached the venue, photographers swarmed. Meghan, over here, they shouted, their flashes blinding the early autumn light. She smiled, that perfect Hollywood smile, poised, radiant, unbothered. But behind it, she was scanning faces, looking for support, looking for validation. Inside the hotel lobby, the atmosphere buzzed. Guests sipped coffee, exchanged business cards, laughed at small talk. Yet when Meghan entered, the tone shifted. Conversations dimmed. Heads turned. A pause, short, but sharp enough to feel. Even those who admired her once weren't sure how to greet her now. Was she a peer? A celebrity? A victim? Or a cautionary tale? She didn't fit neatly into any box anymore. A young tech executive whispered to her colleague, "She's brave for showing up." Another muttered, "Or tone deaf." Both could be true. Still, she smiled through it. That was her armor, the smile that launched 1,000 headlines. Backstage, her publicist handed her a small bottle of water and whispered, "The audience will love you once you start talking." Meghan nodded. They always do. But there was something in her eyes, that flicker of doubt. Maybe she remembered the headlines about her Netflix show cancellations. Maybe she thought about the whispers from former staff calling her impossible to work with. Maybe she just sensed that this wasn't going to be the kind of crowd that clapped politely and moved on. When her name was announced, the applause was uneven. Some clapped out of courtesy, others hesitated. Cameras zoomed in as she walked to the podium. She paused, smiled, and began to speak. For the first minute, it worked. Her tone was calm, confident. She thanked the organizers, praised the women in the room, spoke about resilience. It was textbook Meghan, controlled, emotive, uplifting. But then, something shifted. Her voice cracked slightly when she mentioned the media. A small ripple of murmurs followed. When she spoke about truth and authenticity, a cough from the audience, intentional, dismissive. And then, somewhere from the middle rose the first shout. Practice what you preach. At first, she thought she misheard. Then another voice. Louder. Stop pretending. And that's when it began. The low, rolling boo that seemed to come from every direction. Imagine it. A hall filled with powerful women, CEOs, senators, journalists, turning their energy not into applause, but into rejection. It wasn't just noise. It was judgment. She froze for a heartbeat, then smiled, then stumbled over her next line. When women unite, she began again, her voice wavering. The teleprompter flickered. Her publicist backstage whispered frantically into a headset. The audience shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, unsure. Was this happening? At this event? And yet, the irony was unbearable. Meghan, speaking about women lifting each other up, while being torn down by the very demographic she claimed to represent. It was cinematic, tragic, and maybe inevitable. Because the illusion of her return, that perfectly crafted image of empowerment and grace, had just collided with the unfiltered reality of perception. Outside the building, reporters picked up the noise through the glass walls. Within minutes, social media was flooded with posts. Meghan booed in D.C. Duchess disrespected. Audience turns on Markle. Her team scrambled. Cut the feed. One ordered. Control the narrative, another said. But control was slipping faster than her smile. Still, she powered through. 20 minutes of composure against an audience of resistance. To some, it looked brave. To others, delusional. And when it ended, and she walked backstage, the illusion shattered completely. Her publicist avoided her eyes. Her assistant was already on the phone. The event director muttered, "That was something. Something." The word echoed like mockery. Meghan's hands trembled slightly as she set down her microphone. "They planned this," she whispered. "Someone planned this." Her PR head shook. "No one planned it. They just don't like you right now." That line hit her harder than the booze. Because it was the first time someone on her payroll had said it out loud. They just don't like you right now. It was honest, brutal, and undeniable. Outside, the press was waiting. Questions flying, flashes blinding. "Meghan, how does it feel to be booed? Do you regret coming? Will you step down from speaking engagements?" She said nothing, just kept walking. Each click of her heel echoing down the marble hallway like punctuation marks on the end of an illusion. That night, back in her hotel suite, she scrolled through headlines. Former Duchess humiliated. A royal disgrace. Booed off stage in Washington. But one headline stood out. Maybe the fairy tale is finally over. That one, she read twice. And then 3 times. She closed her laptop, stared into the mirror, and whispered, "No, not yet." Because in Meghan's mind, this wasn't the end, it was the middle. The storm before the next rise. The humiliation before the rebranding. She'd faced worse. She'd been hated before. She'd survived. At least, that's what she told herself. But what she didn't know, what no one in that suite knew, was that the storm wasn't done yet. Because while she was trying to rebuild her image, something far more dangerous was already in motion. Someone in that audience had recorded something backstage. Something that would soon leak. And when it did, it wouldn't just destroy the illusion of her return. It would expose what she never wanted the world to hear. The clip lasted just 28 seconds. But in those 28 seconds, everything Meghan Markle had tried to build, every word, every smile, every carefully orchestrated return, shattered into 1,000 unfixable pieces. It began like 1,000 other viral moments do, with a shaky phone camera and an audience member who couldn't believe what they were witnessing. The video showed her walking onto the Fortune Summit stage, smiling like she owned the world. Then came the voice. Someone yelled from the crowd, "Practice what you preach," followed by another voice, then another, then the unmistakable roar of boos. The sound filled the hall, raw and unapologetic. Meghan's smile faltered, just for a second, before she steadied herself and continued speaking. But that second, that one flicker of human vulnerability, was all it took. Millions watched it on repeat. It was posted, clipped, slowed down, zoomed in, re-edited, captioned, and remixed. The Duchess's fall from grace, one account called it. When karma finally spoke, said another. Within hours, #BoodInDC was trending worldwide. And suddenly, the world wasn't talking about Meghan's message of empowerment. They were talking about her face. That smile. That flinch. That tiny hesitation that betrayed what she really felt. The headlines came fast. Fortune turns against Meghan. Duchess derailed. From cheers to jeers. In less than 12 hours, what had been a $250,000 speaking engagement meant to relaunch her influence had become a global humiliation viewed by over 60 million people across platforms. But how did something so small, a few scattered boos, become an international spectacle? Simple. Because Meghan Markle is no longer just a woman. She's a mirror. For some, she reflects hope. A woman who dared to challenge an ancient institution and speak her truth. For others, she reflects hypocrisy. Someone who weaponized victimhood for fame and profit. Every headline about her confirms something people already believe. So when she was booed, people didn't just see a celebrity being rejected. They saw proof. Proof that the public was catching on. Proof that karma exists. Proof that the narrative was shifting. And once the internet senses a shift, it doesn't stop. It feeds. It multiplies. It destroys. By the next morning, TikTok was flooded with reaction videos. Influencers debated whether she deserved it. YouTubers analyzed her body language frame by frame. Look at her eyes right here, one commentator said, pausing the video. See that blink? That's the moment she realizes the crowd's not with her. The reactions weren't just brutal, they were gleeful. There's a special cruelty in watching someone who built an empire on public perception finally lose control of it. But what made this particular moment so explosive was not just the boos. It was who was in that audience. The Fortune Summit wasn't a crowd of royal watchers or gossip enthusiasts. It was Washington's elite, policy shapers, corporate powerhouses, tech investors, women who built their success on discipline and authenticity. They weren't supposed to boo. These weren't tabloid readers. These were the people Meghan had tried to court, the women she wanted to align herself with. And they had turned on her. One attendee later told a journalist, it wasn't planned. It was spontaneous. People just reacted. There was a sense that she was lecturing us, not speaking to us. Another said, it felt like a performance, like she was still acting. That was the real sting, not the volume of the boos, but who they came from. Because this wasn't London. This was supposed to be her turf. But Washington isn't Hollywood, and it isn't Montecito. It's a place that respects quiet influence, not loud self-promotion. Meghan had walked in expecting applause and walked out realizing something much darker. She was no longer the story America wanted to hear. Back at her hotel, her team was in full crisis mode. Phones buzzed. Calls poured in. Her communications director barked orders. We need to issue a statement. Something about resilience and courage. Her PR head shook her head. No, we stay silent. The more we talk, the more we feed it. Meghan sat on the edge of the bed, watching the replay on her phone. Every frame felt like a slow-motion betrayal. The boos, the camera flashes, the look of shock on the moderator's face. She turned off the sound. It didn't help. She could still hear it. The phone rang again, this time from Archwell headquarters. One of her foundation's directors had called to check in. Translation, assess the damage. The reaction's intense, he said cautiously. We've had donors calling, asking if we plan to comment. Meghan's jaw tightened. Comment on what? On what happened? What happened, she said slowly, was a few rude people in a crowd. That's not news. That's noise. But even as she said it, her voice wavered. Because she knew, deep down, it was news. And it wasn't just noise. It was the sound of her image fracturing. For the first time in years, she wasn't the one controlling the narrative. Her team crafted talking points that night, possible statements, influencer responses, maybe even a sympathetic leak to a friendly magazine. But none of it felt right. Every sentence sounded hollow. Because how do you spin being booed at a women's empowerment event? You can't. So they decided to wait. Let the internet tire itself out. Except it didn't. The next day, late-night hosts joined in. Comedians joked about the Duchess of Drama. Pundits debated whether this meant her political ambitions were over before they began. Some claimed she'd been set up. Others argued it was the inevitable consequence of her arrogance. And as the story snowballed, the internet turned it into something even bigger, a referendum on Meghan herself. People started revisiting old interviews. Clips of her Oprah confession resurfaced. So did old royal footage. The "I just wanted to be heard" soundbite trended again, this time drowned out by sarcastic replies. It was like watching a sandcastle collapse, wave after wave of public opinion washing away everything she'd built. But in the middle of all the noise, one thing slipped through the cracks, a small, easily missed detail from someone who'd been at the event. A reporter for a political blog claimed that something strange had happened backstage right before Meghan walked on stage. There was shouting, she wrote. Someone stormed out of the green room. A phone was thrown. No one's talking about it, but several staff members looked shaken. It was one sentence in a sea of headlines, but it spread fast. Because people love mystery, especially when it involves Meghan Markle. Who stormed out? What were they fighting about? Was it about the speech? The booze? Or something else entirely? That little rumor was about to explode into something much bigger. Meanwhile, Meghan's team continued its damage control. They contacted YouTube channels that had posted the clip, filing copyright claims. They requested social media takedowns, citing harassment. But the internet doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive. Every deleted video seemed to spawn 10 more. Even her allies began to go quiet. Serena Williams didn't post her usual words of support. Oprah's account stayed silent. Gayle King discussed the story on air, but kept her tone distant. The silence was deafening, and Meghan felt it. She could feel the cold creeping in, the same kind of chill she'd felt after leaving the royal family, when the public shifted from fascination to fatigue. When the headlines stopped being about inspiration and started being about irony. That night, sitting alone in the dark, she whispered to herself, "They loved me once." But that was the problem. They didn't anymore. The boos weren't just disapproval, they were closure. A collective statement from the very world she'd tried to dominate. We're done listening. Still, something inside her refused to accept that. This isn't over, she told her publicist the next morning. We'll do another event. Bigger, better, louder. But her publicist didn't answer. He was staring at his phone. What? She snapped. He hesitated. Something's been leaked. What do you mean leaked? He turned the screen toward her. It was a private audio recording. Muffled voices. Angry tones. Her voice. And then, unmistakably, the sound of her saying, "They'll eat this up. They always do." The caption under the clip read, "Backstage before the booing." Within an hour, it was everywhere. The boos had been bad enough. But now, the world had proof, or what looked like proof, that Meghan's sincerity had been an act all along. She stared at the screen in disbelief. "That's not real," she whispered. "That's edited." Her publicist nodded slowly. "Maybe, but that doesn't matter anymore." Because perception had already become reality, and the world that once cheered her courage now questioned her character. But the real question, the one no one had yet asked, was who recorded that audio. Because it wasn't a stranger. It was someone close. Someone she trusted. The video had gone viral, but what no one saw on those screens, what no phone camera captured, was the chaos brewing behind the velvet curtains moments before Meghan Markle walked out to face her loudest humiliation yet. Imagine it. A crowded backstage corridor humming with panic. Assistants darting around with clipboards. Technicians checking mics. The low buzz of whispers turning into arguments. In the middle of it all, Meghan stood still, perfectly composed, at least on the surface. Her heels clicked against the floor with each slow step, the rhythm deliberate, rehearsed. But her fingers, those betrayed her. They drummed nervously against the cue cards. She could hear the crowd on the other side. Their laughter, their chatter, the occasional cheer as another speaker finished. And beneath it, something else, a faint vibration in the air, that sixth sense that tells you when a storm is coming. 5 minutes, called the stage manager. Her communications director, Rachel, hurried over, headset tangled, phone in hand. "Okay, Meghan," she said, trying to sound calm. "Your introduction's been updated. They're going to highlight your charity work first, then pivot to your advocacy for women in leadership." "Good," Meghan replied softly, but her tone was clipped. "Make sure they don't mention the royal family. I want no references to the past. Only the future." Rachel nodded. "Got it." And Meghan, remember, smile. Washington loves confidence. Washington loved control, Meghan thought. Not confidence. Control. But control was slipping. In one corner of the room, 2 assistants were whispering. Meghan caught fragments. Her rate, double what they paid the CEO of IBM. And they're not happy. She glanced over, sharp. The whispers stopped instantly. For the first time that evening, A thought flickered through her mind. Not fear, but irritation. She hated whispers. Whispering meant gossip, and gossip meant vulnerability. She took a breath, rolled her shoulders back, and fixed her eyes on the curtain ahead. 3 minutes. That's when the first real crack appeared. A sudden outburst from the far end of the hallway. A male voice, tense, angry. You can't just change the speech now. It was her speechwriter, Miles. Tall, nervous, and overworked, he'd been hired from a top LA agency, the kind that specialized in brand storytelling. His job was to make Meghan sound presidential. But right now he was losing it. Her PR head, Carla, fired back. We're not changing the message, we're refining the tone. The last paragraph sounds defensive. She needs to sound inspirational, not bitter. Inspirational. Miles snapped. You've cut out every personal story she wanted to tell. That's what makes her human. She doesn't need to be human, Carla shot back. She needs to be unshakable. Unshakable. He scoffed. You mean untouchable? There's a difference. Meghan turned, voice cool but commanding. Enough. The room froze. She walked toward them slowly, her heels slicing through the silence. I appreciate your passion, she said. But this is my voice. My message. And if it's going to sound authentic, it has to come from me. Miles met her eyes, hesitant. Then say it your way, he murmured. But don't blame us when they don't buy it. Rachel stepped between them. Everyone out. We need focus. The team scattered, whispering again as they left. Meghan stood alone now, her reflection caught in the black glass of the teleprompter screen. She wasn't angry. Not exactly. It was something heavier, the realization that even here, even among her own people, she wasn't fully trusted. 2 minutes. Rachel approached again. Your mix ready. Security's in place. You'll go on after the applause cue. Applause cue, Meghan repeated, frowning. Yeah, standard practice. The moderator will signal the audience to clap as you enter. A small, humorless laugh escaped her. Let's hope they don't need reminding. But deep down, she wondered if they might. Because Washington wasn't Los Angeles. There were no studio audiences here. No cue cards telling them when to cheer. And unlike Hollywood, this crowd couldn't be charmed with a rehearsed smile and polished rhetoric. These were women who'd fought for their power the hard way. Boardroom battles, political wars, years of clawing through glass ceilings. To them, Meghan's struggle wasn't relatable. It was curated. 1 minute. She checked her reflection one last time. The lighting backstage was harsh, fluorescent, every pore, every line visible. She leaned closer to the mirror. You've got this, she whispered. You always do. But even she didn't sound convinced. 30 seconds, came the call. Then, just as she took a step toward the stage, the sound that would later haunt her career, the faint click of a phone recording, echoed from behind. She turned slightly. Rachel was adjusting her headset. Miles was nowhere to be seen. And in the far corner, near the exit door, stood someone else. A man she didn't recognize, dressed in black, holding a clipboard. He wasn't part of her team. She could tell instantly. Excuse me, she said sharply. Who are you with? He looked up, startled. Production, he replied quickly. But his badge was turned inward. Before she could press further, the stage manager gestured frantically. It's time. And just like that, she was gone. Swallowed by the blinding lights and the roaring silence of the crowd. But that brief moment, that one exchange, would later become a focal point in the investigation of the leaked recording. Because someone in that room had captured her voice, her laughter, and that one damning line. They'll eat this up. They always do. For now, though, she had no idea. All she knew was that the energy on stage felt wrong. The applause didn't feel real. The smiles in the front row looked strained. Even the moderator's questions seemed rehearsed, robotic. She powered through anyway, one sentence at a time, one fake smile after another. Backstage, Rachel whispered into her headset, stay on the script. Don't improvise. But Meghan didn't listen. Halfway through the speech, she veered off course, ditching the teleprompter, speaking directly from memory. She told a story about overcoming criticism, about standing tall when others try to tear you down. It was emotional, powerful, and dangerously close to self-pity. In the control booth, a producer muttered, she's going off script. Carla groaned. Of course she is. And then came the heckle. It was faint at first, just one voice. Then another. And another. The boos rose like a wave, growing, swelling, breaking over the room. Rachel shouted into her mic, "Fade the lights! Fade the lights!" But it was too late. The cameras were rolling. The microphones were live. And as Meghan tried to push through, to speak louder than the jeers, her voice trembled. Her mask cracked. For the first time, the world saw not the Duchess, but the actress caught mid-performance, realizing the scene wasn't going her way. The moment ended in 30 seconds, but the damage was irreversible. When she stepped backstage, the silence hit harder than the boos. No one moved. No one spoke. Rachel approached slowly. "We'll fix this," she whispered. "It's just optics." But Meghan's eyes were somewhere else. Staring at the floor, replaying the sound in her mind. "Someone recorded me," she said softly. Rachel blinked. "What?" "I heard it," Meghan continued. "Before I went out. A phone click." Rachel frowned. "No one was recording. You're imagining it." But Meghan wasn't imagining it. She knew that sound. She'd lived under microphones for years. You don't forget the sound of a camera watching you. She turned to face the dark hallway behind them, now empty, and whispered, "Someone's setting me up." Rachel hesitated. "Meghan." "Find out who was in that room," Meghan interrupted. "Every single person." Her voice was low, steady, and cold. The kind of tone that made people obey. Rachel nodded slowly and walked off, already dialing security. But it was too late. The recording had already left the building. A single file. A few seconds of laughter. A single, fatal line. Sent to one journalist. Then to another. And then to the world. That night, as the clips spread like wildfire, no one at Archwell knew who leaked it. But everyone had a theory. Some said it was a disgruntled assistant. Others believed it was an insider at the event, maybe even the moderator. But Meghan? She had her own suspicion. Because there was only one person who had access to her notes, her recordings, and her rehearsals, and that person had vanished right after the speech. Miles, her speechwriter, the man who told her not to blame them when the audience didn't buy it. And she was starting to think he hadn't been warning her. He'd been planning something. But the real twist? Miles wasn't acting alone. Someone else had been pulling the strings. Someone who knew how to make one small sound, one leaked recording, turn into a global scandal. And when Meghan discovered who it was, the betrayal would hit harder than the boos ever could. Because this time, it wasn't the public turning on her. It was someone who knew her secrets. Someone who wanted her to fall. And their next move would make sure she did. It started as a whisper, the kind of rumor that travels faster than light in a world addicted to scandal. A mysterious file, 37 seconds long, circulating quietly in encrypted journalist group chats. No one knew where it came from, but everyone wanted it. By dawn, it wasn't a rumor anymore. It was everywhere. Podcasts replayed it. News channels analyzed it. YouTube flooded with breaking, the Meghan audio, thumbnails flashing in red and yellow. And there it was, her voice. Unmistakable. Calm at first, then laced with irritation, then a sharp, mocking laugh. "They'll eat this up. They always do." 6 words that detonated like dynamite. 6 words that erased years of crafted authenticity and careful branding. 6 words that made the world wonder. Was Meghan Markle's activism just another performance? The clip began with muffled chatter, background noise, indistinct voices, the hum of backstage activity. Then her tone emerged clearer, assertive, impatient. "Let's just get this over with," she said. "They want the Duchess, not the woman. So I'll give them the Duchess." A pause. Laughter from someone nearby. Then that final line, delivered with casual confidence. "They'll eat this up. They always do." That was all it took. The internet didn't need proof. It just needed the illusion of it. The hashtag "they'll eat this up" trended by sunrise, flooding every platform. Memes. Reactions. Slow motion edits set to dramatic music. For the first time, Meghan's own words had turned against her. Her weaponized eloquence, her command of narrative, now twisted into evidence of manipulation. CNN debated its authenticity. Fox News declared it the mask slipping. BuzzFeed analyzed the sound quality. Experts claim it's genuine. One article said, based on voice pattern matching and ambient echo. But the truth? It didn't matter. The perception had already solidified. Public trust is like glass. Once cracked, it never truly becomes whole again. And Meghan's glass had shattered. Inside the Montecito compound, Archwell headquarters was in meltdown mode. Staff huddled in the boardroom. eyes glued to a projector screen replaying the clip on loop. The sound filled the room, her voice echoing back at them like a ghost they couldn't silence. "They'll eat this up. They always do." Rachel, her communications director, was pale. "We need to respond," she said, voice trembling slightly. Immediately. A denial, a statement, something. Carla, her PR head, disagreed. "No. If we acknowledge it, we legitimize it. We wait. We monitor engagement. We control the narrative quietly." Miles, the speechwriter, wasn't there. He hadn't answered his phone since the night before. Meghan entered the room in silence. Her presence froze everyone. Dressed in black, hair pulled back tight, she looked composed but haunted, the kind of composure that only comes from exhaustion. "Play it again," she said. Rachel hesitated. "You've heard it, Meghan. Play it." The audio began. Her own voice filled the space, smooth, practiced, and utterly damning. When it ended, no one spoke. The silence was suffocating. Finally, she exhaled. "That's not me." Carla frowned. "It's your voice, Meghan." "No, that's not me. Not like that." She looked around the table, eyes blazing. "Someone edited it. Spliced it. They took pieces of my rehearsal, cut them together." "Then we can prove it," Rachel offered. "We'll hire an audio forensic expert, release a statement saying it's fabricated." Meghan nodded slowly. "Do it. Today." But even as she said it, she knew it wouldn't matter. Because in the court of public opinion, evidence doesn't win, emotion does. And emotionally, the public had already decided. That night, a major news outlet aired the clip on prime time. The anchor's tone was neutral but heavy with implication. If authentic, the recording could suggest that Meghan Markle's remarks at the Fortune Summit were more scripted than sincere. Commentators feigned fairness, but their words dripped with judgment. "It's disappointing," said one guest. "If true, it reveals a troubling pattern. Meghan as performer, not participant." The irony was brutal. Meghan's entire career had been built on her ability to perform empathy, to transform vulnerability into currency. Now, that same skill was being used as evidence against her. The clip became late-night fodder. Comedians joked about Duchess PR rehearsals. TikTok users lip-synced the line, mocking her tone. Even a few politicians weighed in, a senator tweeting, "Real empowerment doesn't need a script." By morning, Archwell's donations dropped by 12%. Brand partners paused campaigns, and the invitations that once flooded her inbox, summits, interviews, endorsements, suddenly went quiet. The Fortune Summit organizers released a short, carefully worded statement. "We are aware of the circulating audio and have no further comment at this time." Translation: we're distancing ourselves. But what hurt Meghan most wasn't the media storm. It was the betrayal. Because she knew only a handful of people could have accessed that recording. And one of them had to be the leaker. Her suspicion turned instantly toward Miles. He'd argued with her hours before the event. He'd vanished afterward. And he had the skills to edit the clip convincingly. Rachel tracked him down through his assistant. He was in Los Angeles, taking time to clear his head. When reached by phone, he sounded calm. Too calm. "I didn't leak anything," he said. "I deleted all files after the speech." "Then who did?" Rachel pressed. "I don't know," he replied. "But if I were you, I'd check your own house. You've got too many people playing both sides." Both sides? That phrase lodged in Meghan's mind like a splinter. Because she knew what he meant. Washington, London, the invisible tug-of-war for control of her story. For months, rumors had swirled about sources close to the palace, feeding negative press to U.S. media. But this felt targeted. Personal. She turned to Rachel. "Check everyone's credentials. Anyone new in the last 3 months. Backgrounds. References. Everything." Rachel hesitated. "That could take days." "Then start now." For the next 48 hours, Archwell operated like a bunker under siege. Laptops were searched. Phones examined. NDAs reissued. But while they were looking inward, the outside world kept turning. A new leak appeared. This time, it wasn't audio. It was a short email, allegedly from Meghan to her PR team. The subject line, optics. The body read, "Make sure photos of applause are prioritized. The boos can be reframed as mixed energy. Never let the narrative slip." It wasn't confirmed. It didn't need to be. The internet decided it was real. And just like that, #mixed energy trended next. Meghan's image, once sleek, strategic, commanding, now looked desperate, calculating, fake. But deep down, beneath the rage and confusion, something else stirred in her. A realization. Someone wasn't just sabotaging her. They were orchestrating it. Each leak was timed perfectly, each narrative crafted to sting just enough. Whoever was behind it knew her schedule, her strategy, her weaknesses. This wasn't random. It was war. That night, she sat alone on her balcony, the California wind carrying the faint scent of ocean salt and jasmine. The moon hung low, pale and indifferent. Her phone buzzed again, another message, anonymous. The subject line read, "You still think you control the story?" Attached was a short audio clip, not the one the public heard. A new one. Her voice again, angry this time. "They think they can boo me? I built myself. They don't get to tear me down." Her blood ran cold. Because this clip wasn't edited. It was real. She remembered saying it. Not to anyone, but to herself. Alone, pacing the dressing room after the event. Whoever had sent it hadn't just been backstage. They'd been in the room. Listening. Recording. She dropped the phone. Rachel burst into the room moments later. "Meghan, what happened?" Meghan's voice was barely a whisper. "Someone's watching us." Rachel froze. "Watching? They have everything," Meghan said, eyes wide. "Not just audio. They have access." Rachel didn't ask who they were. She didn't have to. Because by now, both of them knew this wasn't just a PR crisis. It was infiltration. Someone had planted themselves deep inside her world, patient, precise, and determined to burn it all down. And soon, the world would find out who. But before that truth came to light, there would be another leak. One that would shake not just Meghan's image, but her marriage. Because the next voice in those recordings wasn't hers. It was Harry's. Power doesn't need a spotlight. It doesn't need applause, cameras, or hashtags. In Washington, power moves in whispers, in private dinners, in coded phrases exchanged over wine glasses and conference calls. And on that cold October night, those whispers all revolved around one name, Meghan Markle. The Fortune Summit had ended, but the conversation hadn't. It simply moved behind closed doors. In a city of politicians and power brokers, every public disaster becomes private entertainment. That's the unwritten rule. And Meghan's humiliation had provided exactly the kind of spectacle that Washington thrives on. A beautiful outsider walking straight into the lion's den, confident she could charm the predators. But she'd misunderstood something crucial about this world. In Hollywood, people root for your rise. In Washington, they study your fall. The morning after the summit, the Four Seasons Hotel in Georgetown buzzed with quiet gossip. Behind tinted cafe windows, women in tailored suits leaned over cappuccinos, discussing the Meghan moment like it was a case study. They weren't laughing, not exactly. They were dissecting. "She overplayed her hand," said one lobbyist, stirring her coffee without looking up. "The DC Circuit values humility. You don't walk into this town acting like a movie star." Another woman smirked. And she thought she could rebrand herself as a leader? This isn't Netflix. It's Washington. Their tone wasn't cruel. It was detached. Clinical. Meghan had become a lesson, not a threat. That same afternoon, at the Kennedy Center, a private luncheon took place. The kind of event where only first-name invitations mattered. CEOs, senators, media moguls, and two senior members of the White House communications team. Meghan's name came up again, this time in a different tone. "She's radioactive now," said a media executive, lowering his voice. "Sponsors are panicking." That clip tanked her trust factor. The senator beside him shrugged. It was bound to happen. You can't build a career on grievance forever. People get tired. "But she's not going away," another warned. "She's got reach, and she knows how to weaponize sympathy." "Maybe," came the reply. "But this town runs on access, and no one's taking her calls anymore." That was the real punishment, silence. Not exile, not scandal, but silence. In Washington, silence is the final verdict. Meanwhile, in Montecito, Meghan didn't know it yet, but the invisible doors she'd been trying to open were quietly locking behind her. She'd believed this summit was her bridge back into the elite, the kind of crowd that could relaunch her influence, maybe even set the stage for her rumored political aspirations. But Washington isn't built on charm. It's built on connections, on debts, on the quiet currency of trust. And Meghan had just bankrupted hers. Still, she wasn't ready to surrender. 2 days later, She scheduled a private brunch with a prominent women's foundation director in D.C. Her team called it a relationship repair meeting. She flew in under the radar. No press, no entourage. Just Meghan, 2 aides, and her determination. The director, an older woman with decades of political experience, greeted her warmly but coolly. They sat by the window overlooking the Potomac. Meghan tried to ease into the conversation. "I just wanted to clarify some of the misinformation," she began, smiling. The clip was edited. "I'd never say something like that about my audience." The director listened politely, nodding, saying nothing. Meghan continued, her tone more animated now. "It's frustrating, you know? Every time I try to do something positive, it gets twisted. I wanted that summit to be about women's resilience, not another excuse to attack me." Finally, the director spoke. "Meghan," she said softly, "you have to understand something about this town. DC doesn't hate you. It doesn't love you either. It just doesn't trust you." That sentence landed like a stone. The woman leaned forward. "You're trying to enter a world that runs on credibility. And right now, yours is in question. Not because of the clip, not even because of the booze. It's because no one here knows who the real Meghan Markle is. Are you the Duchess? The activist? The celebrity? The victim? The candidate? Every version contradicts the last." Meghan's expression hardened. "I'm all of those things." "That's the problem," the director replied gently. "In Washington, you can't be everything. You pick a lane, and you stay in it." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the restaurant filled the silence. Then the director added, "You want power? Be consistent. Be predictable, not performative." Meghan forced a smile. "I appreciate your honesty." But inside, she was seething. Consistent. Predictable. Those were words for bureaucrats, not icons. She didn't come to play small. She came to dominate. On the flight back to California, she replayed the conversation in her head over and over. By the time she landed, the humiliation had hardened into resolve. If Washington didn't want her in their power club, she'd build her own. She called Rachel the next morning. "We're changing strategy," she said. "No more begging for approval. I want events that put me in control. Panels, podcasts, branded appearances. We'll create our own network." Rachel hesitated. "We can try, but the sponsors." "Forget sponsors," Meghan interrupted. "We'll self-fund if we have to. I'm not waiting for their permission anymore." She hung up before Rachel could answer. But behind her bravado, there was panic. Because deep down, she knew she needed Washington, the credibility, the influence, the money. And without their backing, her empire would crumble. That same day, a Washington Post editorial ran with the headline, "The Meghan Summit Fiasco, When Image Outpaces Substance." The piece was devastating. "Markle's brand of empowerment feels increasingly synthetic," it read. "At a time when women crave authenticity, she offers packaging. And Washington, more than anywhere else, can smell artifice." It was surgical, not loud, not cruel, but final. The kind of critique that ends careers quietly. The article spread across DC circles like perfume, subtle, potent, unforgettable. It didn't need to scream. It just needed to linger. And it did. Within a week, Meghan's name was dropped from 2 upcoming women's leadership events. One organizer cited logistical changes. Another simply said scheduling conflict. Both were lies. In the corridors of Washington power, she was already being written off as too risky. But here's the twist. Not everyone wanted her gone. One woman, a high-ranking political consultant named Victoria Lang, saw something different in the chaos. Ambition, resilience, desperation. And desperation, in Washington, is leverage. Victoria called Meghan personally. "You don't know me," she said, her voice smooth and confident. "But I think you've been handled badly. You need better representation, someone who understands the city, not just the cameras." Meghan hesitated. "And you do?" "I've made senators likable," Victoria replied. "You? You're just bruised." "I can fix bruised." It was a lifeline. They met days later in Los Angeles. Victoria arrived alone, no entourage, no notes. She didn't flatter. She studied. "I watched the clip," Victoria said. "You weren't wrong, it was edited. But the problem isn't the recording. It's the reaction. The world saw you falter. And in Washington, faltering equals weakness. You need to remind them you're not weak. You're dangerous." "Dangerous," Meghan repeated. "Charismatic. Strategic. Fearless," Victoria clarified. You make people uncomfortable. That's your superpower. But you've been using it wrong. You've been trying to be liked. Forget likability. Power doesn't need applause. For the first time in weeks, Meghan felt something close to hope. Victoria leaned in. If you want your influence back, we start by turning DC's rejection into proof that you're too real for their hypocrisy. We don't fight the boos, we weaponize them. That was the moment the narrative began to shift again, not publicly yet, but in Meghan's mind. She would stop apologizing. She would stop performing for approval. She would build her own version of power, one that didn't need Washington's permission. But she didn't know that while she was plotting her comeback, Washington wasn't done with her. Because the same elite circle she was trying to infiltrate had already uncovered something she'd tried to bury, and it wasn't about the audio, or the summit, or even her speech. It was about money. A quiet investigation had begun, a review of her foundation's finances, her paid appearances, her sponsorship deals. And in those ledgers were numbers that didn't quite add up. Numbers that would soon connect her name to a much bigger problem. Because in Washington, power doesn't just destroy, it exposes. And when the truth came out, Meghan's fight wouldn't be against the press anymore. It would be against the system itself. It began like wildfire, fast, uncontrollable, and impossible to contain. Within minutes of the leaked audio hitting the internet, Meghan Markle's name wasn't just trending. It was burning through every social media platform like dry grass in a storm. Hashtag they'll eat this up. Hashtag booed in DC. Hashtag Duchess downfall. Hashtag fake feminist. Every hashtag was another dagger, another echo of the public's growing resentment. And while Washington whispered in private, the internet screamed in public. TikTok lit up first. Millions of users dissecting every syllable of that 37-second clip, analyzing the tone, the pauses, even her breathing. She didn't sound nervous, one user said in a viral video. She sounded smug. Another replied, she's been performing her whole life. This time, the mask slipped. It wasn't just commentary. It was punishment, digital, merciless, and addictive. Then came Twitter. It was brutal. Meme after meme. Screenshots of her at the podium next to captions like, when your PR script crashes mid-download. One tweet read, the Duchess said they'll eat it up. Well, we just did, and it's bitter. But what hit harder than the mockery was the betrayal. Because the same influencers, activists, and celebrities who once championed her were now silent. Or worse, turning against her. Chrissy Teigen unfollowed her. Ellen's team denied that she had ever been close friends with Meghan. Serena Williams posted a cryptic quote, sometimes silence is protection. Even Oprah, the woman who'd given her one of the most powerful platforms in media history, stayed quiet. The silence was louder than the noise. In Montecito, Meghan watched the backlash unfold from the soft glow of her iPad screen. Each refresh brought new headlines, new mockery, new edits of her face morphing into masks and smirks. Rachel sat beside her, pale and anxious. We can still steer this, she said. We'll post something empowering. I will not be silenced. That'll flip the narrative. Meghan didn't answer. She just kept scrolling. She saw the old clips resurfacing, her speech at the UN, her tearful moments from the Oprah interview, her charity appearances. People were rewatching them with fresh cynicism. Comments flooded in. Fake tears. All rehearsed. Everything about her feels manufactured. And then came the cruelest twist. People began to parody her. TikTok challenges under the hashtag they'll eat this up exploded. Users filmed themselves delivering fake, inspirational speeches in exaggerated posh accents, ending with the phrase, they'll eat this up. Even verified accounts joined in. Comedians, news anchors, college students. Everywhere she looked, the phrase that once sounded harmless now felt like a curse carved into her name. She slammed the iPad shut. Enough, she muttered. Rachel hesitated. Maybe we should lay low for a few days. No, Meghan snapped. Laying low is for people who've lost. I'm not losing. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying what her face refused to show, fear. Because this wasn't just bad press. This was character assassination. And unlike royal scandals or tabloid feuds, this one wasn't confined to headlines. It was global, viral, eternal. The internet doesn't forgive. It archives. Every clip, every insult, every meme, it all lives forever. By the next morning, even international media had joined in. British tabloids celebrated gleefully. "America finally turns on Meghan," screamed one headline. "Booed, exposed, and alone," another read. But across the Atlantic, the tone was colder, more analytical. CNN framed it as a cultural reckoning. The New York Times asked, "Has the Meghan mystique worn off?" For the first time, her critics and former supporters found common ground: exhaustion. People weren't just angry. They were tired. Tired of the drama. Tired of the contradictions. Tired of the endless Meghan versus the world narrative. And that fatigue was deadlier than hatred. Because once people stop feeling, they stop caring. And once they stop caring, they stop listening. By midday, the backlash had grown teeth. A major women's nonprofit quietly removed her from their advisory board. An upcoming podcast deal with Spotify was postponed indefinitely. A brand collaboration in New York pulled her promotional image, citing shifting audience perception. But the biggest blow came when her team noticed something on Instagram. The comments under her last post, a photo of her smiling at the summit, had ballooned to over 3 million. Not with hearts, with knives. "You preached authenticity, but you're a script. You use feminism the way others use perfume, for show. Even your silence feels rehearsed." Rachel tried to manage it, turning off comments. But that only made it worse. Screenshots of the deactivated comment section spread faster than any statement could. "She's hiding again," one user wrote. "Classic Meghan." Meanwhile, Harry's phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, advisors, even family members reaching out. Some sympathetic, most critical. "Do you know what she's done to her image?" One former royal aide texted him. "She's become her own worst headline." Harry didn't respond, but his silence spoke volumes. He was torn between loyalty to his wife and exhaustion from the constant firestorm. He'd lived through royal scrutiny before, but this was different. This wasn't the establishment coming after them. This was the public. The people she'd thought would crown her America's darling. Meghan, meanwhile, was trying to regain control. She called Victoria Lang, the political consultant she'd recently met. "Tell me the truth," Meghan demanded. "How bad is it?" Victoria sighed. "It's bad, but it's not hopeless. You still have eyes on you. Attention is power. The question is, what are you going to do with it?" "I'm not apologizing," Meghan said firmly. "I didn't say you should," Victoria replied. "Apologies feed the mob. You need to pivot. Fast. Pivot to what?" "Victimhood fatigue," Victoria said. "You've been playing the same narrative too long. People are tired. You need a new identity, one they can't predict. You can't look defensive. You have to look above it." "Above it?" Meghan repeated. "Yes," Victoria said. "You don't fight the crowd. You act like the booze never happened. You rise above it, calm, unbothered, detached. You don't chase the story. You become the story." It was risky, arrogant even, but Meghan liked it. That same night, she posted a single image on Instagram, a black and white photo of her holding a pen over a notebook. The caption was just 3 words: "Still I rise." No hashtags, no explanation. Within minutes, it hit 1 million likes. Half the comments were supportive. The other half were venomous. But it didn't matter. She was trending again, on her terms. Except it wasn't really her terms. Because the backlash wasn't just digital anymore. It was bleeding into the real world. A protest formed outside one of her charity offices in Santa Barbara. A small group holding signs that read, "Accountability, not acting." Cameras caught it. The footage aired on morning shows. One protester told reporters, "She uses women's issues to sell herself. That's not empowerment. That's exploitation." The narrative was shifting from scandal to hypocrisy, from outrage to moral indictment. Even Archwell's staff began to crumble under the pressure. Internal Slack messages leaked to the press showed employees complaining about toxic PR overload. One message read, "We're doing more damage control than charity work." When Meghan saw that, she threw her phone across the room. For the first time, she felt the walls closing in, not from outside forces, but from inside her own empire. Victoria tried to reassure her. "It's just turbulence," she said. "Every powerful woman goes through it. You'll outlast them." But Meghan wasn't listening anymore, because something deeper was eating at her, not just the humiliation, but the betrayal. Someone was still leaking. Every few hours.